Hey, I'm Noah.
I'm Adam, and I've got a cactus in my face.
Yeah, I had to move some plants around. Anyway, we're back with more DC Comics, the new 52 reviews. This time with Grifter and Superboy. So, do you want to start off with Grifter or Superboy?
I would say...
You're wrong. We're starting with Grifter.
How did you know what I was going to say?
I don't know. Anyway, so do you want to start?
I'm going to start with Grifter. First, I think a little bit of background on Grifter. Grifter's another Wildstorm property that's is being incorporated into the DC Universe as part of the reboot, so he didn't exist in the DC Universe before now, but is being integrated. I will say, when I saw Grifter, what I noticed was a guy with a mask on his face, wearing some kind of weird Kevlar, falling down from, like, a building, shooting two guns at something, and some spooky spiritual, not spiritual, but supernatural ghosts. Or maybe they're ghosts, maybe they're not ghosts, but they look kind of evil.
None of this happened.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing. He doesn't shoot anyone, and he doesn't dress like that, and he doesn't fall off any buildings.
And he doesn't put on the mask until
he does at the end.
The very last panel.
Yeah, so it's interesting. This entire comic does feel... Well, first I should probably talk about what happens. Do you want to, or should I?
Yeah.
Alright, so what happens in this? There's a guy who's on a plane, and he hears demon voices that are trying to kill him, so he fights them and pretends to be a terrorist. Then we flash back, and we see that he was a con artist who was kidnapped by some mysterious person or something who meant to put demons in him.
For 17 minutes or days or hours.
Yeah, we're kind of ambiguous on that time. And then...
But it was 17 something.
Yes. And then really bad things happen as a result. I'm not going to get into all of the details of it, but then he seems to lose a lot of things. And
his mind.
Maybe his mind. And everyone's after him. Do we want to talk about impressions?
Well, honestly, that's all the story, and that does get into my impressions. There's not much going on. I mean, you know, like what he said was a lot, but it's not told as though that is a lot going on. It's basically, and it's really kind of boring, the story. I thought it was boring. Nothing much happened. A lot of what did happen is flashback, and even then, it's really ambiguous, and we're not told anything. We're just kind of shown, like, two things and left to wonder. And they are trying to set up a mystery, after all. The character Grifter does have amnesia, and he's trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with him, too. But it's not presented in an interesting way. It's just kind of, he has amnesia.
As far as interesting, I think that it's a matter of, the ideas in it aren't bad. I mean, he's being pursued by weird demon things that kidnapped him, and he's a con artist, and now he needs to fight them and get his revenge, or whatever. The problem is that it's also very, very little. I mean, in terms of plot, we really don't get very much at all. I have talked about some things, including too much information, or having too big of an info dump. Most of the ones that don't have a big info dump either really start the story off and get the plot going, or have been, I should say. Really starting the story off and getting the plot going, or having some sort of very detailed action sequence that ends up taking up a good chunk of the story. With this, it doesn't feel like we're really getting any of that. It seems more like we're taking up a lot of space. It doesn't even really feel that long. It feels, just reading through it, it doesn't feel like it's taking...
It's white bread.
A very long time. I wouldn't say it's white bread, because I have no idea what you mean by that.
It's dry, kind of bland, just not that filling all by itself.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm not saying that there are disinteresting ideas in it. I mean, I think that the idea of just someone who's a con artist who ends up getting into this kind of a role, that's interesting. Seeing him con a guy, very briefly, that's interesting. He's being pursued by weird demon things. I mean, that's interesting. It's not that the ideas are disinteresting.
But they're not presented well.
I wouldn't even say it's not that they're presented well. I'm just saying that there's way too little of it to create something that could end up being engaging. I mean, I just don't think that there's enough story here, just in this issue.
It doesn't drag you in at all.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough story to really...
disconnecting.
You know? I don't think there's really
I'm going to
enough...
interrupt you one more time.
Jeez. I don't really think there's enough story to get engaged. There are questions that are asked, but I don't think we know enough. I think we have almost too little information to really care where it's going. And also, again, as far as characters go, since he's really confused and disoriented through this whole thing, and he's not necessarily with a level head, I think it works. I think that it tells the story, it's appropriate, but at the same time, because that's him virtually throughout this entire thing, we find nothing about him as a person, as his personality, as his character, other than that he needs to know these things and that he wants to know what's going on. So yeah, I don't think... Really, context, I think, is what we're missing. I don't think we have enough context for it to be an interesting story. It's not even that it's terribly disinteresting, but there's nothing that I would want to see through and see where it's developing. So if we're really trying to give just the foundation or the background, which is what this seems to be, because it does end on a very... It feels almost like a pilot. It does end with a very sort of, here's the terms of this character and here's the terms of this story. I don't think that it's really done in a way that you'd want to keep reading, or that I'd want to keep reading at least. Can't speak for anything else featuring this character. Again, I don't know very much about him outside of this one book, but from what we have, I wouldn't keep reading with it. And visually, do we want to say a few things about it?
You can. Honestly, I don't really feel anything about this book.
Yeah,
He
seems really bored.
I'm it kind of bored me, just kind of blah, boring.
Yeah. I mean, the book...
It could be interesting, it just wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think there was enough for it to be interesting. But visually, I don't have much problem with it. I think it does interesting things with lighting, that we get kind of this sort of a mood, this sort of a Twilight thing going on. I don't know how the lighting in the room, I'm not sure how easily that could be seen, but we've got kind of this play of these really evening colors, and it seems, I don't know, almost similar to, in terms of color, the opening of Action Comics 1. But at the same time, I think that in terms of the drawing itself, it's very sparse, and there's not very much detail. I'm not going to say not much detail in terms of like figures and facial features and stuff. That's detailed, but I think just in terms of what's being shown and what's in the picture, it's just that you have one thing that we're focusing on, and that's why it's there, and everything else is just very sparse scenery or backdrop. So, yeah, I can't really say that... I can't say it's terrible, but I can't say it really wowed me, and I think that kind of does contribute to the feeling of a sort of lack of context and a sort of emptiness. Yeah.
Letter scale?
Yeah, I would, I don't know, I'd put it at probably a D.
I'd just give it an F. I was just completely disinterested by all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
like, it wasn't, like, Mr. Terrific, like, what you thought about it, where, you know, there was something, but it just, you know, there's nothing to say about it, really. I don't have anything, I don't have any thoughts. It didn't stimulate anything in me. So,
yeah,
F.
I wouldn't put it, because I would think that something like Frankenstein Agent of Shade, I would put F. I don't think it's that, in the sense that there are things that, I don't think that it has nothing in it that's interesting at all. I think there are elements that could be developed more and could be treated better and that I would actually want to follow. I just think that anything that's good just doesn't have anything to support it. I think it's almost as though you have seeds but no soil, so it can't really take root and it can't grow into anything, just in terms of my impressions from this book. Maybe, I'm not going to say that it won't get better as the issues go on, but there's nothing in here to suggest that it will. So, yeah, I would give it, I'd put it at a D. And I'm probably not going to be reading the next issue.
Me neither.
Maybe, like, a half a year from now, if it turns out that it ended up being amazing, I might check it out again. It's not like I'm completely turned off to the idea, but right now I don't see anything to encourage me.
It's not offensive, just blah.
Yeah.
Want to move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. Da 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 da.
I think you just combined the 20th Century Fox fanfare. I would like to point out to Noah that we are not actually reviewing Superman. But, yeah, we get Superboy. Very different.
Yep.
But not necessarily bad.
No.
Also, I would like to say, since we're just talking about covers, this whole thing with Superboy, where he has apparently become GLaDOS's one of GLaDOS's cores, that doesn't appear at all in the
No, it's
book.
actually weird because the way on the cover you could see like the arms, they look kind of atrophied or like they're being built.
Yeah.
But that's not how Superboy is created in the story.
But I think it does kind of get to the idea
Yeah.
of Superboy. Although I would say I don't even think they look atrophied. I think it's just kind of suggesting that he's a robot.
And he's not a robot.
He's not a robot. But in some
and even like
ways,
you see the logo, the shield. It looks like it's being just kind of drilled into his chest or something.
yeah, he is biological,
Yeah.
not mechanical. So that might be a bit misleading. But I think the idea that he's this sort of a machine, that he's a creation,
That gets through.
that gets through. I think that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
trying to go for. So if we take a bit of a look at the plot of Superboy, and I think that just the first panel gets this across very well. Superboy here is actually a biologically enhanced clone that has been engineered and worked on by a group of scientists in this laboratory. He's growing in a tank. He's conscious and he's perceiving the world around him, but he has no idea who he is, what his purpose is, what any of this means. He's just kind of taking in what he's exposed to in this research facility. And then eventually, thing on the computer. Eventually what he does is he breaks free of his tank and ends up sort of destroying the laboratory around him in a blaze of fire using his apparent telekinetic power, which, I mean, we have a good shot of that there. It's this sort of thing. And then eventually, once he's done that, they hold on to him. They need to perform further research on him. There's one scientist who we focus on mostly. He's put into a special battle suit. That's really what we see on the cover, in order to focus and harness his telekinetic power so that he can become sort of the world's greatest super weapon. Then eventually a helicopter arrives on the roof, and Giovanni steps out of it, whereupon he says, I'm going to take this weapon and I have my own purposes for it. There's a slight, very slight similarity to the plot of Pokemon the first movie. Or at least the first 15 minutes of Pokemon the first movie.
Yeah.
Really, to be honest, the parallels are actually very, very strong. I'm not going to say that it's somehow a ripoff or anything, because I think it works very well on its own right, but that entire idea is pretty much the same. So if you've seen Pokemon the first movie,
You've read most of Superboy issue
most
1.
of Superboy #1, just in terms of the premise, just in terms of the idea. Giovanni is not actually Giovanni. It's someone who I am not familiar with. I'm not sure if it's an existing character or someone who was created
His name is Templar.
Yeah, his name is Templar, only for this. I'm not entirely sure. Did some research, couldn't find anything on a Templar, so I'm not sure. Now that we've got the plot out of the way, do we want to talk about impressions of this story?
So, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Pokemon the first movie, too. That probably had something to do with it. But yeah, Superboy's Mewtwo. He has kind of the same opening monologue. I don't want to say it is a ripoff of Pokemon the first movie like him, but it is uncanny just how similar even the writing and dialogue is. He's basically word for word saying what Mewtwo is trying to get across.
Maybe we should talk about what makes Superboy distinct, as opposed to...
Oh, he does not have a tail.
No, seriously, though, I think we should actually... Because I don't want it to sound like this is just some sort of a cut-and-paste ripoff. Do you want me to do that, or do you?
You do it, because I'm just going to make more connections to Pokemon the first movie. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be useless this episode. I'm sorry, guys.
The product of small reference pools, don't worry. Maybe we could tie it into Sonic along the way.
Aww.
Anyway, don't feel bad, cheer up, Charlie. It's your special day. Actually, I don't think that's even how the song goes. Getting back on topic.
I'm just going to play with my cell phone.
Most of this is really told, I think the reason that it works is that it's told through Superboy's internal monologues. We're really getting a sense of he's confused. He doesn't know entirely who he is or why he exists, but at the same time, as the monologues progress and as he talks, he's learning constantly about the world around him, and he's more powerful than these scientists who are controlling him and who he's kind of allowing to control him. But at the same time, yeah, he also has to focus on developing sort of a sense of ethics. There's this whole idea of when they put him through these simulators, he doesn't react to a crazy woman in a burning building. She's not crazy, she's just dying. And that's sort of a pressing question. It's, first off, what are they eventually going to do with him? There's the question of where did his DNA come from, the human DNA in him, or kind of the frog DNA that they jammed in, because there's non-Superman DNA. He's not an exact clone, he's more of a hybrid. But before one of the scientists dies at the very beginning, he says, "No, you have to know, his DNA came from..." So that's actually what's really gotten me the most interested. I want to know where this DNA came from
and
that made him...
and we are introduced to a lot of characters who could be the mother, I guess.
The mother, yeah. It's not even clear if it's a man or a woman, so that's a good point. And also there's a female scientist who's leading the project who is very heavily focused on... I would say that, yeah, Superboy talks a lot about her. She is pretty much overseeing him, so it's odd. It's not as though there's any sort of romantic relationship between them, but there is just a lot of intimacy by the nature of him being this creation and her being this... she's almost like a mother, I would say, not biologically, but just in the role that she's playing. But that's not to suggest that she's necessarily altruistic, that they are creating Superboy as a weapon. So there's this really sort of a sinister element to it. But I think the strongest aspect of it is really Superboy as a person, just him. They call me Superboy, but I don't understand why. Isn't that the first line? I think the first line is, which I think really encapsulates this, everything is, they call me Superboy, I have no idea why. And that's really what this, in terms of the story relating to the character itself, that's what this is about. He's Superboy, and he doesn't know why. But he's learning. And he does seems very innocent, but at the same... Naive, but at the same time, incredibly powerful. So it raises a lot of possibilities, and I really want to know where this DNA is coming from. Do you have anything else that you want to comment on?
I did like it. I did say that before. I did like it. And I want to pick up the next one. I'm getting to the, letter grade part.
We haven't even talked about the art yet.
Oh, no, we haven't.
So we should probably talk about that.
Yeah, we should. I'm sorry, just...
I mean, if you have any other things on the story.
Not really. It is also, along with Pokemon the first movie, it is kind of, like a Superman origin story. There's a Smallville type, situation. So we do see his thoughts not only as a weapon, but as a living being too, and that's interesting. Where we get his point of view from his point of creation, really, and also how he is kind of figuring out what he is as just emotionally, not just physically.
And also, I think that one of the really interesting things, they're asking things like, why is he so sociopathic, supposedly? Why isn't he helping people like Superman? I think that one of the real questions, if it isn't that the DNA came from some sort of sociopathic, megalomaniacal maniac, which they suggest in the story,
kind of a nature versus nurture thing that they're raising.
Would virtue be genetic, or is it a product of your upbringing? I mean, that is, because I think Superman, if we're looking at Superman,
it is his upbringing.
He wasn't born a hero. He physically is capable of being, and through his upbringing took on the role of a hero. So it almost seems kind of odd that they're not even considering that he might be just the product of what they're making him, a blank slate, in that sense.
Tabula rasa.
I
said that with the wrong accent.
I love how you said a Latin phrase with like a Spanish accent. It's close enough though.
Well, I said it with a Latin accent.
Was it a Latin? Well, different Latin. And one criticism I might have one criticism that I kind of have, There are a lot of bits where we do see just scientists and people working in the facility talking to each other and discussing things. It's important. The exposition and the information isn't something that I think could just be left out, but it does. It's a little bit of a lull in the issue. It's not a big complaint, but it's something that I did notice. It did stand out to me. So do we want to talk visually?
Visually, the comic, it has kind of two visual styles.
Two.
Yeah. Well, at least coloring-wise. I'm holding this brush for no reason whatsoever. Anyway, I just kind of been playing with it while he was talking because I was just gonna say Pokemon the first movie a bunch of times.
It's definitely not anime.
No, it isn't anime. But, like, you can see the style here. There's a lot more line and detail. In the lab, there does tend to be a lot more kind of detail and line. And then we could cut to a different panel. Let me just find a good one. And it's just, it is more simple.
Yeah, and I think
there's not as much detail. Everything's very solid,
very smooth.
Yeah.
Not the same sort of lines. It's a lot smoother. It's a lot
there's a lot more color. There's a lot more color. Primary color.
I think it's a much warmer palette. That we have the sort of very.
It's more cartoony.
I wouldn't even say cartoon, but we have this very warm, soft, smooth, kind of welcoming environment, contrasted with kind of the cold impersonality of the lab. So there are these two ideas, but I think
I just noticed
that
this guy has a DC bag on. It has a DC Comics branded book bag.
Yeah, that's really weird. And I'm not going to say that I think particularly highly of that idea. But, so yeah, we have those different moods, different settings. Oddly enough, even his caption boxes have this, they're written in red and white, but the Superboy
They have the Superman shield.
But the Superman shield is written with lines in it almost as though it's a barcode. It's interesting because we don't go very far as far as where he's going as a character in this, although we do know that he's going to be appearing in Teen Titans either next week or the week after that, and since it's not explaining at all how he's part of that, it doesn't say that it takes place earlier in time or anything, but I hope that there's no leap in story or in logic that would be difficult to follow. So, on a letter scale, where would you put this?
I'd give it a B.
B. I
think it's interesting, both visually, very well done. The story, you do want to know what happens. I don't know if he finds all 3 orbs and awakes Lugia to save the world.
Not even the same movie.
Whatever. But no, I do want to see how Superboy develops. Both, comic story, kind of got that double entendre there in the 2 meetings that develop.
I would do more than
no, that's about it. It does make me want to read more, and I felt that this was grabbing, unlike Grifter. Grifter.
I would put it.
See, I hate it so much. I'm not even going to pronounce it correctly.
Can't even remember the name.
No, I'm just going to lie down
now. That's how little of an impact it's made on him. I would argue that also would be probably. I think it really is. It's very set up. There's not really very much story in terms of plot details, but I think most of it is background and also character. It's a lot of character development. It's mostly character development, but I think character development in a good way. So even though we're focusing mostly on character and not so much on events, I do definitely want to see where it's going, so I put it at a B also, and I'm going to be picking up the next issue. Hopefully Teen Titans isn't going to be chewing Congress. And we are almost at the end of everything, I suppose.
You have one more comic left to review.
And that will be
Resurrection Man. Next time on whatever we're calling this.
Yeah.